The 7th century world was strictly divided. To the north and east of the Arabian Peninsula lay two massive, entrenched empires. Between them, the Arab tribes survived in a harsh desert, largely ignored by the global powers of the day. On one side sat the Byzantine Empire. From Constantinople, Roman emperors wielded massive professional armies and controlled Mediterranean trade routes. Their rival was the Persian Empire, a competing titan that had spent centuries locked in a brutal cycle of warfare with Rome for control of the known world. Compared to these superpowers, the Arabs were a fractured periphery. But within this desert, a small group of religious exiles had been driven out of Mecca and into the oasis of Medina, arriving with nothing but the clothes they wore. Within a single decade, these refugees unified the peninsula. They survived every attempt at localized annihilation and stood at the borders of the great powers, prepared to challenge the stability of the entire Roman and Persian world. The first test of their survival occurred in 624 CE at the Wells of Badr. The exiles sought to intercept a Meccan caravan to reclaim the property and wealth that had been seized from them during their flight from Mecca. Mecca responded with a professional force, a massive mismatch, 313 exiles against an army of 1,000 soldiers. The resource deficit was even worse. Mecca brought 100 horses and 170 camels, while the Muslims had exactly 2 horses and 70 camels. To negate the enemy's cavalry advantage, the Muslims occupied the local water wells. This forced the Meccans to cross the desert heat and fight on ground chosen by the smaller force. The defensive strategy held. The 313 exiles repelled the charge and killed several key Meccan leaders, forcing the larger professional army into a retreat. Victory at Badr secured their immediate future and signaled to every tribe in the peninsula that the Meccans were no longer the undisputed power in Arabia. A year later at Mount Uhud, the Meccans returned with 3,000 troops against 1,000 Muslims. The defense relied on this specific mountain ridge, where 50 archers were stationed to prevent a flanking maneuver. Discipline failed when 41 archers abandoned their post to collect abandoned equipment. Khalid bin Walid, a Meccan commander, exploited the gap and launched a cavalry strike that nearly dismantled the Muslim defense. Exploiting this weakness, the Meccans later formed a coalition of 10,000 soldiers to march on Medina. This force was larger than the city's entire population, presenting a threat that traditional desert tactics could not resolve. Strategically, Medina was shielded by mountains on 3 sides. To protect the only open flank, the exiles adopted a foreign military technique, digging a massive trench to neutralize the enemy cavalry. The resulting trench spanned the length of roughly 36 cricket stadiums. It turned the open desert into a physical barrier that the coalition's horses could not cross. The coalition sat at the edge of the trench for nearly a month, unable to bypass the engineering. When a desert storm eventually destroyed their camp, the frustrated tribes fractured and retreated. Surviving the siege of the trench demonstrated that the Muslim community could no longer be broken by superior numbers, allowing them to pivot from defense to significant economic expansion. A 10-year peace with Mecca allowed the Muslims to focus on the northern fortress of Khaybar, a massive export hub for dates and fruit. Its capture provided enough resources to end the years of poverty and sustain more ambitious military campaigns. This northern reach triggered a clash with a Roman vassal state. When a Muslim ambassador was executed, Medina was forced to send a military response against an imperial power. 3,000 Muslims marched north, but they encountered a Roman imperial army of roughly 200,000. The scale of the mismatch was unprecedented for the Arab force. The Muslims used these rocky mounting valleys to funnel the Roman advance. By fighting in these tight spaces, they prevented the larger army from utilizing its full numbers to surround the smaller force. Khalid bin Walid, now a Muslim commander, utilized the night to reshuffle his troops, swapping the positions of every unit. He ordered them to kick up massive clouds of dust at dawn to simulate the arrival of fresh reinforcements. The Romans misinterpreted the troop movements and the dust as the arrival of a much larger army. Fearing they were being drawn into a trap, the imperial forces held their position, allowing the Muslims to withdraw safely. The ability to survive a Roman engagement convinced the remaining Arab tribes to join the new power. This momentum led to the bloodless surrender of Mecca and the final unification of the peninsula's cultural and economic center. By the campaign at Tabuk, the Muslims fielded 30,000 men. The Roman forces on the border failed to appear, acknowledging the arrival of a new, organized regional power. Just as this new state achieved dominance, it faced its most severe internal test, the death of Prophet Muhammad at age 63. Panic and Medina threatened to undo years of unification. Without their central leader, the state faced the immediate risk of tribal factions breaking away and returning to internal warfare. Abu Bakr stabilized the community by directing their loyalty away from an individual and toward the system they had established. He stated clearly that while the man had passed, the purpose of their state remained. The community elected Abu Bakr as the first caliph, proving that the Islamic State had evolved into a resilient political institution. This transition ensured that a movement starting with 313 exiles would successfully maintain its momentum as a global empire.